It's January 1692 in Salem Village, Massachusetts. Things are not well in the home of village minister Samuel Parris. Samuel's 9-year-old daughter Betty and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams are acting strangely. The girls dash about, dive under furniture, bark like dogs, fall dumb, contort in pain, babble nonsense, and complain of fever. To the shock of her father, Betty throws a Bible across the room. Abigail launches herself into the air and makes flying noises. Things get even more alarming. Other girls nearby begin to behave in odd but similar ways. 4, then 5, then 6 afflicted girls. What on earth is happening? Is this a bizarre, contagious affliction? Or is it, possibly, the sign of something else? The devil, perhaps? We all know where this story takes us. There will be accusations of witchcraft, then more accusations of witchcraft. The hysteria will not end until 19 men and women are carted to Gallows Hill and hanged. Another man of over 80 years will be pressed to death under heavy stones after he refuses to submit to trial. Between 100 and 200 people will face accusations of witchcraft. Dozens will languish in jail for months without trials. Some will die there. Then, almost as soon as it began, it'll be over. For us, the question is, why this travesty of justice occurred? Nothing about it was inevitable. The Salem tragedy owed itself to a series of unfortunate events, to a Puritan understanding of an active and devious devil, to an ongoing frontier war, to trying economic conditions, to congregational strife, to teenage rebellion and boredom, and to personal jealousies. There is no simple explanation. What happened after the girls of Salem Village began exhibiting strange behavior is this. A neighbor of Reverend Parris, Mary Sibley, proposed a form of counter-magic to the Parris' family slave, John. Sibley told John to bake a rye cake containing Betty's and Abigail's urine and to feed it to the family dog. Why a dog? Well, dogs, it was thought, were used as by witches as agents to carry out their devilish commands. The cake might draw the witch to the animal, perhaps even transfer the witch's spell to it. Well, nice try, but it didn't work. The witch cake experiment infuriated Reverend Parris. He publicly reproached Sibley for bringing counter magic into his parsonage. He called it going to the devil for help against the devil. Parris preferred to rely on prayer. But when prayer didn't work, he turned to a local physician named William Griggs and to another minister, John Hale. Hale and Griggs diagnosed the problem. It was witchcraft. The widespread belief that witches targeted children supported their conclusion. Neither Hale nor Griggs nor anyone else in Salem doubted that Satan was real or that he acted in the world. The devil sowed disease and bad fortune. He orchestrated natural catastrophes. By late February, 12-year-old Ann Putnam and Elizabeth Hubbard, the 16-year-old niece of Dr. Griggs, were also choking, shuddering, contorting. Thomas Putnam pressed his daughter. Who do you blame for your behavior? Ann supplied 3 names, and then it began. With the prominent Putnam family supporting the hunt for witches, officials had to pay attention. Stacy Schiff, in her book The Witches, notes another influential cheerleader for the prosecution violent fits, a crawling sensation on the skin, vomiting, choking, and most interestingly, hallucinations. The hallucinogenic drug, LSD, is a derivative of ergot. But there are problems with this theory. It cannot, for example, explain the afflictions suffered by others in Salem later in the year when the conditions weren't right for a rye infestation. Now, the actual cause of the behavior was probably something else. Stress, guilt, child abuse, epilepsy, and delusional psychosis have all been suggested. Adolescent boredom and rebellion might have had a lot to do with it. The theory seized upon in 1692, however, was witchcraft. And just 3 years earlier, Cotton Mather had published a book widely read throughout Puritan Massachusetts called Memorable Providences Relating to Witchcrafts and Possessions. In his book, Mather described the suspected witchcraft of an Irish washerwoman in Boston. Mather concluded Memorable Providences with this thought: I am resolved after this never to use but just one grain of patience with any man that shall impose upon me a denial of devils or of witches. I shall count him downright impudent if he assert the non-existence of things which we have had such palpable convictions of. Betty's behavior in many ways mirrored that of the washerwoman described in Mather's book. It was easy to believe in 1692, in Salem, with an Indian war raging less than 70 miles away, that the devil was close at hand. Sudden and violent death had become common and was on every mind. But getting back to Tituba, it's possible the whole matter might have ended with admonishments, were it not for her performance. First, she denied any guilt, but then, sensing that she might become a scapegoat, Tituba confessed. At the same time, though, she tried to deflect most of the blame to others. She claimed that she was approached by a tall man from Boston, Satan, we guess, who asked her to sign in his book and to do his work. Yes, Tituba declared, she was a witch. In fact, she and 4 other witches, including Good and Osborne, had flown through the air on their poles. But she was a reluctant witch. When Good and Osborne ordered her to kill Thomas Putnam's son, she tried to run to Reverend Parris for counsel, but the devil blocked her path. And when Tituba resisted Sarah Good's demand that she torture girls in Parris's home, she was struck deaf. Now you can imagine how jaw-dropping these revelations must have seemed. Stacy Schiff writes the effect of the confession was, quote, as if Tituba had handed out hallucinogens. Before long, others will join Tituba in describing their own late-night broom rides, encounters with yellow birds, wolves, long-nosed hairy creatures with wings. Schiff writes, from Tituba on down, the testimony is all bluebirds and canaries, yellow dogs, red rats, red meat, red bread, red books. I'll quote just a small portion of the transcript from Tituba's examination to give you a flavor of it. Where did you go? Up to Mr. Putnam's, and he make me hurt the child. Who did make you go? Man that is very strong, and these 2 women, Good and Osborne. But I'm sorry. How did you go? What did you ride upon? I ride upon a stick or pole, and Good and Osborne ride beside me. We ride, taking hold of one another. I don't know how far we go, for I saw no trees nor path, but was presently there. Now, Tituba's confession made her a central figure in the prosecutions. Her confession also silenced most skeptics. The authorities were on the right track. Witch hunting had become an obsession. Soon likely selected Bishop for his first prosecution because he believed a stronger case could be made against her than any of the other accused witches. During the trial, a field hand testified that he saw Bishop Spector steal eggs and then transform herself into a cat. Confessed witch Deliverance Hobbs testified that Bishop was one of them. And a villager named Samuel Gray told the court that Bishop visited his bed at night and tormented him. Wishful thinking, perhaps. Meanwhile, a jury of matrons assigned to examine Bishop's body reported that they found an excrescence of flesh, a place where her familiar might have sucked. Several girls testified that Bishop Spector afflicted them, and other villagers claimed that Bishop was responsible for various miseries that they had suffered. One witness, for example, testified that Bishop was transported under guard to the Salem meeting house, and there they saw her stare at a building, and that caused a part of the building to fall to the ground. Now, by modern standards, of course, this evidence is laughable, but as causes and effects were understood in 1692, it was anything but. Bishop's jury returned a verdict of guilty. But not everyone who participated in the trial was satisfied. One of the judges was so aghast at the conduct of the trial that he resigned from the court. Chief Justice Stoughton had no reservations. He signed Bishop's death warrant. And on June 10, 1692, Bishop was carted to Gallows Hill and hanged, the first victim of the Salem witchcraft trials. As the summer of 1692 warmed, the pace of trials picked up. Not all defendants were as disreputable as Bridget Bishop. Rebecca Nurse, for example, was a pious, respected woman. Yet Nurse's Spector, according to Ann Putnam Jr. and Abigail Williams, attacked them. Ann Putnam Sr. testified that Nurse demanded that she sign the Devil's Book. There was a lot of talk about signing the Devil's Book in these trials. Book signing was a ritual. It was widely believed to be the first step in joining the devil's forces. Now, why these accusations against Nurse, a respected, church-going older woman? Nurse was one of the 3 town sisters, all of whom were accused by the Putnams of witchcraft. It is probably not a coincidence that the town family had a long-standing quarrel with the Putnam family. Apart from the evidence of the Putnam family members, the major piece of evidence against Nurse was testimony that soon after she lectured a neighbor farmer about allowing his pig to root in her garden, the farmer died. The Nurse trial shows how these trials could become a way to rid the village not only of eccentrics, but also a way to settle old scores. Well, wonder of wonders, the Nurse jury, for the first time in the Salem trials, returns a verdict of not guilty. This verdict displeased Chief Justice Stoughton. He told the jury to go back and consider again a statement of Nurse's that might be considered an admission of guilt, but actually is probably just a result of her confusion about the question. Nurse was old and nearly deaf. But no matter, the jury did as it was told, and after 2 more sets of deliberations, finally came back with a verdict of guilty. And on July 19, 1692, Nurse rode with 4 other convicted witches in a cart to Gallows Hill. Persons who scoffed at accusations of witchcraft risked becoming targets of accusations themselves. The most notable witchcraft skeptic to face charges was John Proctor, who some might know as a central figure in Arthur Miller's fictionalized account of the Salem witch hunt, The Crucible. Proctor was an opinionated tavern owner who openly denounced the witch hunt. His denunciation led to the accusation of witchcraft against him by Ann Putnam and by others. 18-year-old Elizabeth Booth testified that she was orthodoxy and contributed in the next generation to the rise of Anglicans, Baptists, and other more tolerant brands of Christianity. One other thought: the Salem witchcraft trials were unusual in that many of the key actors, the accusers and the accused, were female. Mothers, daughters, wives, and servants. Women played lead roles in this historical drama. The Salem witchcraft trials are history, but witch hunting in America did not end in Salem. We will see witch hunting in the 1950s, led by Senator Joseph McCarthy. Of course, there is a distinction. There were no witches, but there were communists. We will see a form of witch hunting in the late 1980s when daycare providers across the country faced accusations of child abuse. Each generation must learn the lessons of history or risk repeating its mistakes. Salem is a cautionary tale. It reveals the danger of drawing conclusions ahead of the evidence and of dispensing with the rules of evidence and fair procedure that can save us from rushing to judgment. The story of Salem has value even today. Stacy Schiff puts it this way: Salem endures not only as a metaphor, but as a vaccine and a taunt. It glares at us when fear paralyzes reason, when we overreact or overcorrect. Visitors to Salem today can see poignant reminders of 1692. On a monument marking the grave of Rebecca Nurse, the least excusable of all the convictions, are inscribed the words of John Greenleaf Whittier: "O Christian martyr, who for truth could die, when all about thee owned the hideous lie, the world redeemed from superstition's sway is breathing freer for thy sake today." We can wish it were so.